forth a little bit. So you good?
Okay.
Follow you.
It's following me.
Yeah.
It's kind of creepy.
Did it zoom in? No. What? Good fix. And nothing happened?
So it's live streaming and not recording. It's recording as well.
There we go. It should have zoomed in a little bit. Didn't do anything. Kidding. Turn
We
blue.
need to stand in a certain spot.
Nope. Whatever. Fine. Just gonna tell people what's coming up the end in the stream here. Is that microphone on to me?
I don't know.
Yeah. I can get it.
Can I just talk loud so I can? Do you think I can?
I mean, the people online will hear it.
Oh,
These people. So
then I need to stay there the whole time.
we'll turn the microphone so it faces you. Hmm? We can hear ourselves right now just fine. But everything good. We're actually streaming right now. Yeah. Yeah, keep it on. Yeah. This is Ben yeah.
You guys want to? Should I go get him? Are you ready?
He's gonna bring your check mic to make sure that we're ready.
He said he has to go push a button.
That's and that way everyone in the room.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not called that, but I'm using my phone and oh no, we're still not streaming.
Uh-oh. Did Lori bring a message?
She did.
Good. Okay.
But the words. I don't know what it. Oh, battery saver.
Here, you buddy. I didn't
Talk to me, Amy.
talk to you.
Yeah,
Hi, Trevor. How are you doing?
perfect. All right, we got you on the so everyone not watching at home can still hear this, but it's not going.
They can hear without the microphone? Yeah.
A microphone. And it picks up really well.
Maybe I just stay here and talk. If you can't get the microphone working. Yeah. Kind of nervous. I'm gonna pretend that's not happening. So how many? No, you know what? Afterwards, I'll ask you how many people are watching at home, but I don't want to know now.
No one, because
Okay, good.
not doing it.
Oh,
Oh, that good. Yeah, that should work.
Son.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Doesn't want to. There you go.
Want to. All right. We started running a little late with technical difficulties. We've been trying to stream online with YouTube for everyone at home. We're using a different wireless device, and it's still not projecting all the video information we want out there. So, YouTube people, we will see you around 10 or 11 o'clock tonight. Uh, but first, welcome to Penitentiary Glen. I'm going to hand it over to Tony.
Hi everyone, how we doing? Great, great, great. Great. Yes. And please mind the animals. They shouldn't eat you, except maybe Dunkelosseus over there. He's probably the only one that would eat you guys. We had a prehistoric Ohio event yesterday, and they're still kind of up, so you guys get to see them before we take them back. Couple of things. If you go out either door and make a left down the hall, there's restrooms down there. They are open, so please help yourself if need be. Also, our birding programs are on a flyer on the back table. This has all of our birding programs for the year, as well as some sort of fun information on the back if you're just starting out birding. Our spring birding programs start up in March, so just a couple weeks away. We've introduced some evening programs this year, so we have some evening bird walks. If you guys are not early birds, pun intended. And we are also cycling in a couple of different parks instead of just birding here or at Sugar River Park, for example. We'll be cycling in like Hidden Lake, Baby Landing, so there'll be some other cool parks. It's actually not on here because it's technically classified as a nature at night program. But our Creatures of the Night program in early April, we'll be going out to the bluffs to look for woodcocks. So you can see that online. I don't think it's full yet, so get it while it lasts. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy and enjoy the meeting. If you guys have any birding questions when you're in the parks and you see me, then feel free to ask. It's pretty good.
Because I don't.
Perfect, perfect. We're going back to Trevor? All right.
Yep, we're
back
going
to Trevor.
back to me. So, oh, so my name is Trevor Wursler. I'm the president of Blackbrook Audubon. I'd also like to recognize the rest of our board. We have Marion Wagner, our vice president, Becky Donaldson, our secretary, and our treasurer. We also have publicity chair Lori White and Deb Schuster and Pat Morris are tag teaming our field trips as of right now. And then we have our new board committee, Tammy and John. So if you got any coffee or something to eat, they're back there being our hospitality chairs. And I'll be looking for other people to help out, sign up for different ones to bring food to the meetings. So look for them at our next couple meetings, which will be here. So if you can remember this spot for the rest of the year, this is where we'll be in the third Tuesday of every month. Starting next month, we'll start nominations for new officers for Blackbrook. So that means starting in April, we're looking to help refresh and replace people on the board. So if you're looking for something to do on Tuesday nights, if you're here anyway, you'd be a good candidate. Our last field trip was just on Sunday, and we had 22 people and 36 species, including a harlequin duck. So if you missed our field trip, like I did, that work, harlequin duck. It still isn't looking at me, so they're like, what? All right. And our March field trip is going to be at the Shreve Migratory Sensation. So if anyone's never gone down there, that's sort of the official kickoff of birding season. You go down to Shreve, Ohio. They have speakers and different birding hotspots. We might put a sign-up sheet on the back table, but we'll also put more information on our website about carpooling from Lakeland and things like that. But it's a pretty big event. And Pat's talk.
Hi. Um, so we're going to carpool from Lakeland at the park and ride. We'll have hopefully the banner that says Blackbrook Audubon, so you'll know where we are. You are more than welcome to drive yourselves. The event down there starts at like 7:30 in the morning. We're meeting at 8. It's about an hour and a half drive. And they're not gonna have like buses bussing you around, so people, whoever drives down there, you're gonna drive yourself to the different locations. But do sign up, because if there's a change in the plan, leave an email or a phone number or something so we can get a hold of you. Got it?
Cool. Stop. We're gonna have to edit all this out. All right. We also have our Sunday morning bird walk at the Manor Marsh, so that's the fourth Sunday of every month. So we only have February, March, April, 3 more walks at Manor Marsh, and so that next one will be coming up this fourth Sunday. Should be this Sunday, and then do we have numbers from last month? Record crowd numbers are on 42? 32. That's more manageable. So pretty good point in there. We post the numbers after on our Facebook page, so you can see that there. But now we are going to turn to door prizes. Did everyone get a ticket? Raise your hand if you did get a ticket. He said it doesn't matter, so. Oh, you might be sorry. Alright. We have fabulous door prizes.
Yeah, a little birdhouse. And what is this, Trevor?
That's a hummingbird feeder because Tuxatani Phil is wrong. It felt like spring, so I wrote a hummingbird feeder.
So, if you can figure out how to make. And then we have a it's just donated tonight that's going to tie in very well to Amy's program. It's by Doug Tony about bringing nature home. This is a really good book. So anybody else want to be in the door prize now? Okay, the last 3 numbers, 977.
Rig.
Your forfeit. Okay. 963. What do you want?
Doesn't she have to draw the next ticket?
Oh, it. Okay. And check the final So 950. All right, we're there. All right, I'm done.
I have one surprise. It's from Mary Huey, but she left in English. In my car. Wow. Um, at this point, I think we're just ready to have Becky Donaldson introduce our guest.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to introduce Amy tonight. I got to know Amy doing the O2 Extension Volunteer Pollinator Specialist. So, she's 17 or 18.
I think 18.
So, we're bee buddies.
Yeah.
So, if you guys have native bee questions, we're the gals for you. So, and there's probably lots of you out there too. But Amy has been involved with this kind of work for a long while. She volunteered here at Penitentiary Glen working in the native plant gardens out front. And she volunteered to lead gorge tours. She's also a Ohio certified volunteer naturalist and a master gardener.
Yep.
Did I miss anything else?
Master Rain Garden.
Master rain gardener.
A bunch of volunteer things.
And she so wears the hat of being a new native plant nursery owner. So she will probably tell us maybe a little bit more about that. And she's a Concord gal, so she's from right around the corner. We're excited and happy. She said she was kind of nervous about talking to this crowd because maybe we would all know more than she does. But everybody puts their own slant on whatever they're talking about, and she is very well qualified to share this space. So,
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, when I said that, it's funny because there's a lot of people in the audience that I've learned from. So it's kind of disconcerting being up here, but okay. So I am here to talk to you tonight about native plants that grow the cats birds love. And I'll tell you that I thought I was the funniest thing ever when I thought of that. It was late at night, and I have to realize the more tired I am, the funnier I think I am. So my supplemental title is The Best Bird Feeders Are Planted, Not Built. As Becky mentioned, I'm here, Lake County Master Gardener Volunteer. I'm also chairperson of our annual Home Gardeners Workshop, and I never miss a chance to plug it. So our next workshop is March 11th, Saturday at Lakeland Community College. Super fun day. We offer 12 speakers. You have to pick 4 of the 12. So for a mere $48, you get your 4 speakers, continental breakfast, lunch, snack, parting gift, and the chance to sit next to like-minded gardeners. I have my little note out there to remind myself that Becky Donaldson is speaking at our workshop. She's speaking with Natalie Gertz Young on Wicked Weeds. And I don't know if any of you have been watching the Inviting Biodiversity webinars from the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. They've been having these wonderful webinars every Wednesday afternoon. Last week, Jim McCormick spoke and shared that he co-authored a book called Gardening for Moths. His co-author is Chelsea Gottfried. She's a naturalist at Crawford Park, and we have her speaking at our workshop. She's talking on her book, Gardening for Moths. She'll have her book there, and she'll be signing books. If you need information on workshop, if you'd like to come, you can go to our website, lake.osu.edu. You can email us at mgblakecounty@gmail.com or new telephone number, so I read it, 440-853-2625. Oh, wrong button. Okay, there we go. So as far as native plants and birds, I thought a lot about how to start this, and I thought, I'm going to, and I don't mean this facetiously, I'm going to skip over all the depressing facts because we all know birds are in trouble. So I didn't want to go there. We're going to look positive and start with the solution, that what we can do. We know that the birds that are in trouble are the ones that feed on insects. We know that 90% of terrestrial bird species feed on insects. They feed their young on insects. What do we do to solve this problem and help save these birds? It's very simple. We need to plant native plants. So how awesome is that? The solution to this problem is you get to go buy beautiful plants and put your hands in the soil. Sounds like a win.
Tonight I'm going to talk about what is a native. I'm going to talk about the benefits of native plants. We're going to talk in particular about some native plants that support birds, and then tips on how to create a bird-friendly habitat. Um, I'll direct your attention to the photo. It is a purple flowering raspberry. Most of the plants that I show in photos here are can be gotten from one of the plant sales from the local soil and water conservation district because they asked me to specify and highlight those plants that are being sold by either Lake Geauga, Cuyahoga, or Ashtabula County. Purple flowering raspberry is a beautiful plant. It's a native raspberry. It's ornamental. You don't want to eat the raspberries. They're rather dry and crumbly, but the birds love them. The flowers attract a lot of beneficial insects. The plant itself is rather large. It's 3 to 6 foot tall and spreads 6 to 12 feet wide. But if you have the site for it, it's a gorgeous plant. The other thing I wanted to say is we're so lucky because the things you need to do to create a bird-friendly habitat are very similar to what you need to do to create a pollinator-friendly habitat. And pollinator love is at an all-time high. So whether the lovers know it or not, inadvertently, when they create their pollinator habitat, they're helping our birds out as well, and vice versa. So what is a native plant? It's a plant that occurs naturally in an ecoregion and habitat where over the course of evolutionary time, so you're talking hundreds and thousands of years, it has adapted to the physical conditions and co-evolved with the other species in the ecosystem. And that co-evolutionary relationship, that's what's very important. A perfect example of that, which we all, I'm sure, are aware of, is the monarch butterfly and milkweed. So the photo is of a monarch butterfly caterpillar on Asclepias inclinata swamp milkweed. Native plants are also referred to as straight species. And the term native is usually used with a geographic qualifier. So you say native to North America, or native to Ohio, or native to Lake County. One of the key characteristics of native plants is that they are open pollinated, which means they are either cross pollinated or self pollinated. Cross pollination occurs between two plants via wind or water or beneficial insects, including pollinators. And self pollination happens on one plant when one plant has male flowers and female flowers on the same plant and it's able to pollinate itself. The wonderful thing about being open pollinated is that all of those plants are genetically diverse, and genetic diversity is extremely important. It allows the wild plant populations to handle the stresses of disease or insects or climate change. The other key characteristic of being open pollinated is that the offsprings of those plants have the same characteristics as the parent plant. So if I have an Echinacea purpurea, a purple coneflower, which is a native plant, and I allow it to grow to seed, and you have all these little baby Echinacea purpureas coming up, those offspring are going to have the same characteristics as that original parent plant. This photo is of snowberry. Snowberry is a beautiful plant, Symphoricarpus albus. There is a companion plant to that called coralberry. Guess what color those berries are? And birds love the berries. It's about 3 to 6 foot tall and wide. A lot of these plants are lovely. You can just tuck them in wherever. The opposite of being open pollinated, we're talking about cultivar. So what is cultivar? A cultivar is a plant that has been selected by humans for a particular trait. Cultivars are not genetically diverse, and actually they're clones because they are created by asexual propagation. That's tissue cuttings. Plant cuttings or tissue. What is that? Tissue cuttings or plant? Whatever. They're asexually propagated. One example of a cultivar, again, talking about our purple coneflower, which I think it's funny. To me, those petals are pink. I don't know how it got the name purple, but whatever. It's purple coneflower. It is deer resistant. Plant breeders looked at that beautiful flower and thought, wouldn't that be pretty if we created a flower with white petals? So they created Echinacea purpurea white swan. It is a purple coneflower with white petals. Cultivar names an identifying characteristic of if you have a cultivar or not. Cultivar names are included in single quotes. So you see single quotes around white swan. If you see a plant tag, whether it says native or not on top, if it's got single quotation marks, you know it's not a straight species. It may be what people commonly refer to as a nativar, a cultivar of a native plant. That is greenwashing. I have to say I'm guilty of it myself. It just denotes that that cultivar was cultivated from a native plant as opposed to a not native plant. And you want to research before you use cultivars because you need to determine what has been changed in that plant and how did that change affect its value and its support of our native wildlife. So Doug Tallamy, who wrote the book that was just auctioned off, Bringing Nature Home. He's got another book, Nature's Best Hope, and Oaks. I haven't read Oaks. I've read the other two. They're very good books. I would highly recommend reading them. But Doug Tallamy and two graduate students, Emily Basden and Desiree Narango, did a study of woody plants, straight species and cultivars, and they wanted to determine, do those cultivars support your native wildlife the same as the straight species? And they found that for 4 cultivated characteristics, disease resistance, altered growth habit, leaf variegation, or enhanced fruiting, if the plant was cultivated for those 4 characteristics, it seemed to support our native wildlife as good as the straight species did. So an example of disease resistance would be Monarda didyma Jacob Klein. Anyone who's tried to grow Monarda didyma or any Monarda, which is bee balm, you know that they succumb to powdery mildew. It's just what they do. I don't think it's a big deal, but some people do. Powdery mildew is a fungus. It presents as a gray powder on the leaves. If the powdery mildew is bad enough, it can shrivel up the leaves. They fall off the plant. That usually happens at the end of the season. It doesn't really affect the usually doesn't affect the attractiveness to pollinators. Scientists realized they saw this problem. People didn't like the idea that their plants look kind of ratty at the end of the year, so they created Jacob Klein. Jacob Klein is more resistant to powdery mildew. It's not that it doesn't get it, because it still does, but it gets it later in the season and it gets it lighter than the straight species do. So in that regard, that Monarda didyma Jacob Klein, the only reason it's different from Monarda didyma is because it's more resistant to powdery mildew. That's okay. Thumbs up. You're all right using that. As you are with fragrant sumac. Fragrant sumac is a beautiful plant. Look at those leaves. It's a member of the poison ivy family, although none of it is poisonous. And it has, which is super cool, hairy berries. I mean, what plant has that? So it grows to be, though, 6 feet tall, 10 feet wide. It's a big one. So plant breeders created Rus aromatica growlow. Growlow gets to be 2 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So that's a big difference. The only reason that Growlow, or the only difference between Growlow and that straight species is that it's more compact. So that's acceptable. It doesn't seem to have a negative effect on wildlife. I did want to mention enhanced fruiting because I know Lake County, I think, is selling Maryland Beauty Winterberry. That's a cultivar of our straight species. Maryland Beauty has more berries and slightly bigger berries than the straight species. Again, you're okay to use. But there are cultivated characteristics that do not support wildlife the same way. Cultivars that change the bloom color, the flower shape, or the leaf color, it changes the plant so much the wildlife doesn't recognize it. So back to our purple coneflower, you notice that it has that hedgehog-like center. That's where the nectar and pollen is. I'm picking on razzmatazz, which is a cultivar. It's a beautiful flower, isn't it? That pom-pom-like of petals. However, if you're a hungry little bee who's evolved hundreds and thousands of years with a straight species, and you're looking for that hedgehog-like center, that's where the nectar and pollen on, and you land on razzmatazz, how do you know? You don't know how to work the flower to get to the nectar and pollen. They just don't recognize it. In addition to which, sometimes, and I'm not sure if that's the case with razzmatazz or not, but sometimes the flowers are changed so much the nectar and pollen have been bred out of the flower. So there's no reward, even if the hungry little bee can get to that flower. Ninebark is a beautiful plant, Physocarpus. but it's in straight species, it has green leaves. There are a number of cultivars out there that have changed the leaf color. There are bronze leaves and dark purple and almost blackish leaves. And again, it's changed the plant so much so our native wildlife, who is looking for a white flower and green leaves, doesn't recognize it. So these cultivars are not okay to use. They do not support wildlife. And of course, there's always exception. Usually with any horticultural issue, the common answer is it depends. So Annie White, who is from the University of Vermont, she did a study on herbaceous perennials comparing the straight species to the cultivars, and she found that overall the straight species attracted more pollinators and more beneficial insects than the cultivars, except for one plant, Culver's root, which is naturally a white flowering plant. There's a cultivar called Lavender Towers, which has flowers that are tinged lavender, and for some reason, there were more beneficial insects recorded on that plant than the straight species. So the takeaway is that you really need to learn about the plant that you're choosing. If you decide to go with cultivar, it's always better to do the straight species. But if you decide to do the cultivar, you need to figure out or ask the nursery owner or whatever, how has that plant been changed? And then refer back to this guideline. Does that change affect its support of wildlife? So we talked about native plants. Now we have to talk about non-native plants. So a non-native plant has been introduced with human help, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to a new place or new habitat where it was not previously found. The problem with our non-native plants is that they do not support our food web. So here are some familiar plants that are not native, and I chose these because through discussions with multiple people, some people think these plants are native because they're so prevalent. You can find them everywhere. Panicle hydrangea comes from Asia. That is not native. There are two native hydrangeas, Hydrangea arborescens, which is smooth hydrangea, or oak leaf hydrangea. Those are native hydrangeas. This one's new. Lilacs are not native. Hostas and daylilies are not native. And wouldn't that be great if they were, because there are so many of them all over the place. These plants fall into when I talk to people about plants, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush stroke, I always say there are three tiers of plants. So there's your top tier of plants that contributes positively to your ecosystem. Those would be your native plants, your straight species. Then you have that middle tier that doesn't contribute positively. It doesn't detract or contribute negatively either, except for the fact that that's taking up space that you could be planting, could be used with native plants that are supporting the wildlife. That's where these guys fall. And then you have your bottom tier, which is we're going to talk about in 1 second. But before we go on to the next slide, I did want to talk about the 70-30 rule. So studies have been determined that in your gardens, instead of going, I mean, if you want to go hardcore native and rip everything out and replace it all with natives, hey, more power to you. That's wonderful. But if you don't, you can concentrate on 70% of the plant biomass being native and 30% being not. And if you go by that 70-30 rule, then overall your yard is still, that's still a thumbs up for our native wildlife. So that you can keep the lilac that reminds you of your mom, or you can keep the hosta that you got at the local plant swap from your friend and not feel guilty as long as 70% of the remaining biomass in your yard is native. Oh, wait, I forgot to say something. Because that situation where more than 70% or more is native, it has been shown that is a higher nesting success rate for that situation. So now we're down to that third tier, which is the plants that negatively affect the environment, and that's your invasive plants. So an invasive plant is a plant that has been introduced from another region, so it is a non-native plant. It spreads aggressively and it outcompetes our natives for space, light, nutrients, and water. So the Ohio Invasive Plant Council has a list of invasive plants on their website. These 4 are ones that I'm personally battling. You can tell how bad they are. I rim them in red instead of the black. So multiflora rose, purple loosestrife, garlic mustard, Japanese honeysuckle. If you have These non-native or these invasives or any of the invasives on that list, you want to make sure to get rid of them. You have to take those invasive plants out. I was pleased to find a photo of the Japanese honeysuckle with a bee on it because it brings up a good point. There are different qualities of nectar and pollen. And the nectar and pollen that are being offered by non-natives, it's like us eating at fast food restaurants. It's junk food for the pollinators. The native nectar and pollen, that's the quality nectar and pollen you want to. In addition to the native fruits there's been studies done and it's been determined that they are definitely more nutritious for birds than the non-native fruits. So how do you know if a plant is native or non-native? Well, there's two very good websites you can consult. The USDA Plants Database, or BONIP, which is the Biota of North America program. I'm not fond of the name, but the information is excellent on the website. This map happens to be from the USDA Plants Database, and it's showing that palm sedge, the photo to the left of it, is native to North America and native to Ohio. You can also scooch in on those maps, and it will show on a county level. Palm sedge is a wonderful plant. It's a member of the Carex genus. And the Carex genus, it's hard to get people to plant Carex as it is with native grasses. But the Carex genus it's amazing. It has so many plants. There's a Carex for every situation that you could need a plant for. And did anyone happen to see, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, Mount Cuba Center had a Carex webinar. They released the results of their Carex trials. And Mount Cuba Center is like E.F. Hutton, like when they speak, everyone listens. And they released the results of their Carex trials, and Sam Hoadley did a webinar on all the Carexes and ranked them as far as what they ordered. And of course, the one that they picked to be the top Carex, top performing Carex, you're not going to be able to find that anywhere. That's gone. But next year maybe, or the year afterwards. That one was Carex woodii. It's called Pretty Sedge, and it is quite pretty. But there are a number of fantastic Carex, including seersucker sedge, which happens to be my favorite Carex. The plant is gorgeous. It has broad foliage. It's puckered like a Christmas ribbon, and the flower stalks that come out of it shoot out like fireworks. They're striped, green, purpley brown, and then they have those flowers at the top that turn into seeds, which the birds love the Carex. So Carex can be used as a ground cover. It can be used as an alternative to lawn. They can be used as a filler because we want green mulch. We don't want brown mulch. No more bark on the ground unless you're going to compost it. That's different. But you want plants touching each other. They like to live in communities. They're very good friends with each other, and you can use Carex to fill in wherever you have space. So now we're into the benefits of native plants, and the first major benefit is one I've already talked about, to support the local food web. So you want to plant plants like nodding onion, which is a gorgeous herbaceous perennial. It comes up and the stalk turns over like a little shepherd's crook and the flower dangles. That provides a great source of nectar and pollen. Little blue stem are one of our native grasses. All the grasses, if you don't cut them off, let them go to seed. They provide a great source of seeds for the birds. Little blue stem is gorgeous. I have it in my backyard, and in the gloaming or the twilight, they glitter, they glow. It's a silvery glow. And then, of course, common elderberry, which is a great plant. Those flowers attract a ton of beneficial insects. And of course, then you have your fruit for the birds. Fruit for the birds or for your butterfly garden volunteers. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. When I was here volunteering at the butterfly garden, we decided we had such a good group. There were about 12 of us that came every Tuesday morning, and we decided we started bringing in treats. And so we decided someone needed to make a pie. So, okay, I volunteered to make the elderberry pie because I've got elderberry growing in my yard, and I spent a couple hours picking those berries. They're very tiny, and I removed the stems because I didn't want my fellow volunteers to eat any stems. So put the berries, rinsed them off. They're sitting in a colander, and went and made my pie crust. Came back to pick up the colander, and the colander was moving, like the whole thing, it was moving. It was all full of worms. And so no elderberry pie for my fellow volunteers, but they all got a good laugh out of it. So I took the colander and ran outside and dumped it near the bush. So the birds were very happy. So, yeah. So the birds love them. You just have to be careful before you eat them. Check for those worms. Another reason that, or another way that native plants provide for our native wildlife is that they are host plants. So a host plant is a plant on which butterflies and moths lay their eggs. And the host plant could be an herbaceous perennial like the common violet, which many people think is a weed. I love the violet, and it is the host plant for the fritillary butterfly. New Jersey tea is a small little shrub. It gets to be about 4 feet tall. It's the host plant for the spring azure butterfly. And yes, I said that quickly because I don't know how to pronounce that word. And then pawpaws are a beautiful, yep, that's Trevor's plant. That's why I put them in for you, Trevor. A host plant for the zebra swallowtail. So butterflies are programmed to lay their eggs on a plant that they know their caterpillar will be able to eat when it emerges from the egg. So some butterflies are generalist and they can lay on a number of different plants. Some butterflies are specialist and they need certain kinds of plants. Another reason to plant native plants is that they require less inputs than non-native plants. So I wasn't sure I wanted to use this photo or not because I think it's used a lot, but it does illustrate a great point. Look at the root system. I don't know if you can read that, but on the non-native side, that's spirea and daylilies and perennial fountain grass. And then that short little green line that looks like it has no roots, that's turf grass. And then on the native side, go two over, prairie dropseed, those roots go down 8 feet. Black-eyed Susan goes down 6 feet, and ninebark, which we talked about earlier, goes down 16 feet into the ground. So native plants are adapted to our environment, all right? They do not require fertilizer. You should never use pesticides on a native plant. I'm not saying they don't need care because they do until you get them established. But as master gardeners, we use the mantra, right plant, right place. So you need to know your site when you're looking for a plant. You know your site. Are you dry? Are you wet? Is it sunny? Is it shady? And then you go out and you select a plant that fits the site. That makes you happy. It makes the plant happy. Win-win. Don't go out and buy a plant and then force that plant to grow in this site because that's where you want it to grow because you'll end up not happy and you might end up with a dead plant. So if native plants are planted in the right place, then they will need no fertilizer at all and they'll be extraordinarily happy. Another wonderful reason to plant native plants is because they attract beneficial insects. So these are all photos of beneficial insects. Those are good garden bugs. You want these in your yard because they predate or parasitize the pest insects in your yard. And so my favorite of all of those is the wheel bug because look what it's eating. Japanese beetle. I hate Japanese beetles. So there's an excellent book called Good Garden Bugs, appropriate name, by Mary Gardner, who's a professor at The Ohio State University. It's a great book. It lists not only the beneficial garden bugs, it talks about what pest insects they take care of, and it also gives you specific suggestions on which plants to plant to attract those beneficial bugs. You want to plant native plants so that you can preserve the genetic diversity of wild plant populations because you have to know that plant DNA may move from your yard to the wild plant populations around you. So you want to make sure if that's happening, that's a positive contribution. You also want to preserve the natural character of a region. We want Arizona to look like Arizona and Maine to look like Maine and Ohio to look like Ohio. And how does that happen? You plant the plants that are native to your state. So you want to plant royal catchfly, which is a gorgeous plant. Look at that beautiful red. Butterfly milkweed is not only a host plant for the monarch butterfly, but provides a great source of nectar and pollen for beneficial insects. Fall sunflower gets to be about 4 feet tall, beautiful pop of sunshine in your yard. Oh, now we're back to host plants. We're going to talk a little more about that. There were studies done that prove, and this is a little mind-blowing, that 14% of native plants provide for 90% of the Lepidoptera out there. So just on the side here, we're going to talk more about that in 1 second. On the side, I've got 2 more examples of host plants for you. Red maple is the host plant for the Cecropia moth, which is a beautiful moth. I've never seen the moth or the caterpillar, which that caterpillar looks like a work of art, but I have seen the pupa that it's left behind. I actually saw it here when I was gardening. Spice bush, Lindera benzoin, beautiful plant. It's dioecious, which means there's female plants and there's male plants. So you need one of each in order for the female to produce its berries. And it is the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail. So how do you know which native plants to plant? Well, Doug Tallamy teamed up with the National Wildlife Federation and they created this website. It's called the National Wildlife Federation Native Plant Finder. And what you do, when you open that website up, they ask you for your zip code. You type in your zip code and it brings up in two different categories. They do flowers and grasses or trees and shrubs. The plants that support the most Lepidoptera for your zip code. So I use 44024, and in that zip code, my zip code, the top supporting plants are goldenrods. They support 122 species of Lepidoptera. So that means if I'm planting my goldenrod or letting it grow because it's growing naturally all over my yard, then I may be helping 122 species. Isn't that awesome? As far as trees and shrubs go, for 44024, the top performing tree, as it is for almost every zip code, would be an oak tree. And oak trees support 477 species of Lepidoptera. It's huge. So even if you did nothing else, but you went home and planted an oak tree, you're doing a lot. This website can be worked a number of different ways. You can get this list, like I said, by putting in your zip code. You can also put in a native plant and it will show you what Lepidoptera you're supporting by planting that native plant. Or vice versa, if you want to attract a particular butterfly or moth, you type that in and it brings up the plants that you need to plant in order for those for you to attract that butterfly or moth. So now we're going to go and talk about some specific trees and shrubs because that's what the Lake County or the Soil and Water Conservation Districts are selling. And the slide layout is kind of the same for the next few plants that I'm going to talk about. I have the sun conditions in the top left corner, and in the top right corner, if applicable, NWF is National Wildlife Federation, so I list the number of species it's supporting. I tried to indicate if the plant is deer resistant or not. We'll start with oaks, which are not. So you want to cage them when they're young. A white oak, Quercus alba, can get to be 50 to 80 feet tall. It can take up to 20 years for a white oak to produce acorns, or it could be as long as 50 to 100 years. But that doesn't matter as far as the support of Lepidoptera because all you need is leaves, and leaves happen the first year. If you need something that's a little smaller for your yard, you can try a dwarf chestnut oak, Quercus prinoides. That only gets to be 12 to 25 feet tall and wide. That has acorns every 3 to 5 years, in case you're interested. There's an oak for almost every situation. If you have a wetter spot, you might want to try a swamp white oak, Quercus bicolor. If you have a drier spot, go post oak, Quercus stellata. There's a ton of oaks to choose from, and all of them support the Lepidoptera. For my zip code, and I suspect for this zip code, the second most supportive plant genus was Prunus, which is the cherry family. It includes the cherries and wild plum. It supports 381 species of Lepidoptera. It goes from black cherries, which are super tall at 80 feet, beautiful white flowers in the spring, to choke cherry. Most of the members of the Prunus family have white flowers and they're spring bloomers. Choke cherry, look at those gorgeous berries. They do choke you. I did try one and it was horrible. But birds love them. So the wild plum, that's Prunus americana, that grows in almost the same characteristics as your choke cherry. It gets to be about 25 feet tall, part sun, full shade. Prunus are unfortunately not deer resistant, so that will need to be caged if you are trying to grow those. Service berries, this is one of my faves. Service berries support 105 species of Lepidoptera. They're absolutely a gorgeous plant. The white flowers come out before the leaves unfurl in the spring. The flowers attract a ton of beneficial insects. There's just a constant buzz around my service berries in my yard. The berries, of course, I'm sorry, the flowers, of course, produce berries. You have a couple different choices. You have Amelanchier, excuse me, arborea. or latus or canadensis, and they range in height from 25 to 40 feet tall. There's also another species that is, I'll say a new native, meaning just new to me, Amelanchier nantucketensis. And it is not native to Ohio, but it's native to North America. It's most often found in the New England states, but it is only 4 to 5 feet tall. So it's like an Amelanchier shrub. So if you don't have room for the tree, then you can go nantucketensis. Virginia sweet spire happens to not support any species of Lepidoptera. However, look at that photo. If you were a bird looking for a nesting site or cover, wouldn't you want to fly in there? And then Itea britannica, that's the botanical name, they produce beautiful white flowers that do attract beneficial insects as well as berries for the seeds, sorry, for the birds. Deer do not care for this, which is great. Itea, if you were going to plant Itea and look at it's a beautiful mosaic of fall color for us. They tend to be a little bit scraggly, so you might want to plant 2 or 3 in a clump, and then you get that beautiful thicket. Okay, dogwoods are in the Cornus genus. They support 111 species. And when I created this slide, it was very interesting to me the difference in deer resistance between these members of the Cornus genus. The top photo is Cornus alternifolia. It's pagoda dogwood. The name was changed to Suida alternifolia. I seem to be the only one using it, which is why I put Cornus up there too. It's commonly referred to as Cornus. It's a beautiful tree. It gets to be about 25 feet tall, and you get that lovely horizontal branching, which is why it's named pagoda dogwood. Dark blue berries are loved by the birds, and the plant is, for us, it's gorgeous. Even after the birds eat the berry, the little stems that the berries are on are a bright red, so it gives a lot of interest in your yard. Silky dogwood on the bottom left, that can get to be 6 to 12 feet tall and wide. Red twig dogwood on the right can be 6 to 9 feet tall and wide. Red twig dogwood was deer resistant. Silky dogwood made me laugh. So as master gardeners, we can only present research-based information. So most of the information, all of the information I got from here is from universities, research-based. And I found universities that said, yep, silky dogwood is deer resistant. And then you look over here and there's another university that said, deer love it. So I think it just depends on the deer pressure in your own yard. You'll have to try that. Because silky dogwood and red twig dogwood are so big, there are cultivars that have been created. Silky dogwood is Red Rover, and then red twig dogwood, the cultivar is called Arctic Fire, and those cultivars are 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. So that's the only thing that's been changed on them was an altered growth habit, so they would be acceptable for you to use if you didn't have the room for the straight species. Okay, evergreens. You have to have evergreens. They don't directly support Lepidoptera. They're not host plants. You need them for birds. Native evergreens in Ohio are a little hard because most of them are huge. A lot of them are susceptible being under attack by disease or insects, but you need to try your best to find one that fits your spot. So one of the plant sales is selling Eastern white pine, which is a very tall, 80 feet tall. However, I did find research-based websites that said you could prune that white pine down to a hedge. I've never seen that in person, but they had pictures that look quite pretty. So I'm going to try that this year. I'm just curious. Arborvitae, as you can tell, not deer resistant at all. The deer love it, which is why you see so many of them with like that look like a lollipop with green on the top and a bare trunk. However, the juice is worth the squeeze. You have to try it. It's native to Ohio. I would try to plant it, cage it if you have to. If you don't have room for the straight species, which can get to be 40 feet tall, there are cultivars out there. Again, just altered for growth habit. Techne is tops off at about 15 feet tall, and Het's midget is 2 feet tall. So who doesn't have room for that? American larch is also known as tamarack. That is 80 feet tall. It's a beautiful tree. It's a deciduous evergreen, which I laughed hysterically when that concept was first brought up because it's such an oxymoron. But it glows this beautiful golden color before all the needles drop off. Even naked, it still provides nesting site and perches for bird. And then transferring from the great big tall evergreens to a little ground cover, I think it's Lake County Soil and Water is selling Allegheny Pachysandra, which is our native Pachysandra. A lot of people don't know we do have a native. It is much more slowly growing than the Japanese Pachysandra. It's a very pretty plant. It's got a white flower that looks similar to a foam flower that comes up in spring. When you say evergreen, we have to take that with a grain of salt. The leaves do tend to bronze out in the winter and they do look a little tattered, but they're there. So they do qualify as an evergreen. And you just leave the leaves alone and the new growth comes up lovely and green in the spring. It is a slow grower. It spreads very slowly by rhizomes. So if you want to cover a patch, I would recommend buying multiple plants and planting them together. Then we have sassafras. Sassafras is also dioecious, meaning you've got male and female plants on separate plants. But the female plants, if properly pollinated, will produce blackberries that the birds love. So I was thinking, when I mentioned that there are people in the audience that taught us, so I'm going to call out Marion Williams. Marion Williams ran the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist course, which I took at Holden Arboretum so long ago. And she taught us many things, but a couple of these tips that she taught us stuck with me, and I was able to share with my kids. For example, the black cherry that we already talked about. An identifying characteristic of it when you're walking through the woods, the bark looks like burnt corn chips. Burnt corn chips, BC black cherry. Okay. White pine, which we already talked about, the needles are in bundles of 5 on a white pine. So WHITE. There we go. And then the sassafras trees, they have 4 different shape leaves on the tree. So you've got the entire leaf, then you've got a right mitten and a left mitten, and then you've got 3 lobed leaves, all in the same tree, which is pretty cool. So those are little tips that it helped me engage my kids. They all thought those were really cool, and they still remember now. We walk, they're like, oh, there's burnt corn chips, there's the black cherry tree. So sassafras, beautiful yellow flowers in the spring. Again, that's a tree, but it does have a suckering habit, and you can see it can grow on its way up to a tree. It can be treated as a shrub. Summer sweet. This is another one of my favorite plants. Clethra alnifolia. The straight species is a white flowering plant. It gets to be 3 to 5 foot tall, 6 foot wide. There is a cultivar called hummingbird that's just 3 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. The only difference is the altered growth habits, so you're okay with that. Summer sweet attracts a ton of beneficial insects. Hummingbirds enjoy the nectar, and then the flowers go to seed, and that's when the birds get their food. There is a cultivar, I included that picture on the right. There's a cultivar called Ruby Spice, and it's the flowers are obviously tinged pink, and I haven't found any information on it, and no one's done that I could find a study on it. But I will say that I've watched the straight species white flower against the Ruby Spice pink flower. To me, unofficially, it seems like it attracts the same amount of beneficial insects. Both plants are quite busy. And isn't that the coolest picture ever? I was so excited to find that. So this is redbud. It supports 24 species of Lepidoptera. It blooms out early in the spring, an excellent nectar source. Again, like the amelanchier, the flowers happen before the leaves come out. What it's doing there on that picture is it's called cauliflory. It's where the flowers are born or grow out of the main trunk or old wood. And so you get this beautiful, I've seen that happening out in the woods before. I didn't realize what was going on. I thought something was wrong, but it's not. It can get to be quite a decent size. It's like an understory tree, 30 foot tall. The C next to the deer, that's from the Rutgers website. That means it's occasionally severely damaged. Yeah. A little CYA there. So black gum, I had to put, for some reason I could not remember the characteristics of black gum, so I wrote them down for myself. Black gum, again, no support of the Lepidoptera. However, lovely plant for birds. It's got excellent source of nectar and pollen for beneficial insects. So those flowers, they're quite insignificant looking to us, but very popular with the insects. It has a long taproot. It's difficult to transplant, so you want to make sure you're planting it where it's going to stay. It's interesting because it grows in standing water, but it also can grow in dry sites as well. As far as deer go, when it's young, the deer seem to like it. It loses palatability as the plant matures. Okay, witch hazel. The photo with the yellow flowers, that's our common witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana. That one is native to Ohio. The other commonly grown witch hazel here is vernal witch hazel. It's not native to Ohio, but it's native around us. That one, vernal witch hazel, because of the name, obviously, it's blooming in the spring, so January through April. Our native to Ohio witch hazel, the virginiana, is blooming from October to December. And the seeds that come out of it, super cool. They shoot out 30 feet away from the parent plant, attractive to the birds. It's interesting, I did want to remark upon the genus name, Hamamelis. Hama means at the same time, and melis comes from melon, which means fruit. And it refers to the fact that witch hazel will have flowers and fruit on the same plant at the same time, which is very rare. Okay, now we are on tips to create a bird-friendly habitat. One of the plant sales is selling marsh marigold. It's a beautiful little plant. It gets to be just about 1 to 1.5 foot tall. The flowers are very attractive to beneficial insects, and then it produces seeds, which the birds like. When you're planting marsh marigold, it can handle sun, but it likes moist sites. So, a word of warning that if you're planting it in a site that's going to dry out or is on the drier side, it may go dormant in the summer. So, you might want to plan for that dormancy. But as long as it has enough water, it's fine. When you are planting for birds, you want to make sure that you are providing food for the entire year. You want to provide insects, you want to provide berries, nuts, and seeds. These are just a couple examples of what you could provide. Pussy willow is an excellent plant to have. It supports 328 species of Lepidoptera, in addition to being an excellent source of nectar and pollen. Um, and it's also a larval host. If you're looking for berries, you can look at a red cedar. Now, red cedars are quite large. They can grow up to 65 feet tall, but there are shorter cultivars. Shade-bark hickories. Hickories in general, the Carya genus, supports 231 species of Lepidoptera. Okay. You want to plant, because the birds need insects, you need to attract the insects to your gardens, of course. So you want to plant in clumps. Your herbaceous perennials will need to be planted in clumps for a couple different reasons. One is if you're trying to attract butterflies, butterflies are flying high up, they're looking down, they need that mass of color to call them in. They can see that grouping of Echinacea purpurea much better than they can see one plant. If you're trying to attract bees, which I did find that there are some birds that eat bees. So bees practice something called flower fidelity or flower constancy, and it's a super cool concept. When they leave the nest to forage, on one foraging trip, they will only forage on the same flower. So they land on a wild geranium and they'll go from wild geranium to wild geranium to wild geranium. I say the and I mean she because the females are the workers. And after she's all full, she goes back to the nest and she disgorges her nectar and pollen that she's carrying on her legs. And on the next trip, she'll go out and she might land on a royal catchfly. And she'll go from royal catchfly to royal catchfly, and then go back. So to make life easier for the bees, you want to plant in clumps so they can gather enough in one trip. Boom, right in one spot. You also want to plant a variety of flower shapes and sizes and colors to accommodate different pollinators. Again, with the bees will visit flowers that correspond to the length of their tongue. So you want to plant penstemon, which has that tubular flower for long tongue bees and for hummingbirds. You want flowers that have that landing pad surface because some, like the butterflies and the beetles, they aren't as good of a flyer as bees. They want to land on a plant and then get their nectar and pollen. Some, that's Pygnanthemum muticum, which is, I think it's American mountain mint. They are a very short flower, so they would attract the short-tongued bees and other insects. And you always want to include native grasses, whether you're trying to include attract pollinators or birds. And this is a hard sell for people. People don't get as excited about grasses as they do about herbaceous perennials or even trees. But they are beautiful. They are host plants for the Lepidoptera. So of these here, Panicum supported the most species, 27 species of Lepidoptera. Some of them didn't support species of Lepidoptera. However, they still provide nesting habitat and seeds if you don't cut the grasses back. I'll tell you, it drives me nuts when I'm driving around and you see a clump of grass that's tight at the base with a buzz cut. Oh, drives me nuts. Plant the native grasses, although those are probably the miscanthus grasses, so maybe we shouldn't care. You need to plant your native grasses, let them grow, let them seed, flop over, and leave them alone, and let them be a habitat. And then in spring, if you must clean up, you can do it then. But if you don't have to, just leave them because the new grasses will come up right through the old ones. So up here I've included the traditional ones that people know about, such as your switchgrass, your big lustrum. Prairie dropseed is a beautiful little one. It's mounded on the ground. It has flower heads that some people say smell like buttered popcorn. I don't smell it, but other people do. Let's see, what's another common one? Indian grass. It has a beautiful seed head. So if you're attracted to miscanthus grass, which is a horrible non-native invasive, if you have a miscanthus grass, shame on you. Go home and cut it down tonight. And then, and then you have to plant Indian grass, which has a beautiful plume, very similar to miscanthus, except that was native. And then there's also some grasses that people don't know about as much. Purple lovegrass is a gorgeous grass. It's about 2 feet tall. The seed heads are literally purple. That's the picture I'm talking after a rainstorm, so there's actually water droplets on that. At the end of the season, sometimes those inflorescences will detach from the grass and roll off like a tumbleweed, which is pretty funny to watch. Side oats grama, that's Bouteloua, which you should own that just because that's a fun name to say. But the side oats grama, the flowers, they all hang on the bottom of the foliage, and the flowers are absolutely gorgeous. Not only do they blow very gracefully in the wind, but if you take a look at the flowers, there's purple anthers, that's the male part of the plant, that hang below the white stigmas, the female part of the plant. It's just so delicate, so pretty. And then tufted hairgrass, that's Deschampsia. That's a grass, a native grass that will grow in the shade, at least part shade. So here, this will be your favorite slide of all because what you need to do here is nothing. Don't do. So you want to leave the seed heads and leave the stems and leave the leaves and leave the brush pile, leave the dead trees if it's safe. You know, if you don't want to do that, if it's not safe. Think of what happens out in the wild. No one is going out in the wild cleaning up, and it provides so much habitat. I'm getting a little worried with the weather we're having this winter because there's so many warm days, and I know a lot of gardeners, our hands are itching to get in the soil, and someone of my friends who I scolded told me that she was already out cleaning up. You don't want to clean up anything in your yard until you have at least 3 consecutive days of 50 degrees or more, because that gives the beneficial insects and the mammals and whoever's nesting underneath all of the debris that you've left a chance to emerge. If you're cleaning up before then you're ruining habitat. Instead of having bee houses, which you can have them if you want, you do have to, like the ones that you buy, the little houses with all the tubes in them, you do have to make sure that you maintain those. They're actually not recommended in the pollinator world because not only is sanitization is hard on those. If you're going to use them, you need to get the paper tubes and insert the paper tubes inside the wooden tubes. But also because those bee houses congregate a large number of insects in one spot, which makes them very vulnerable to predation. Much better if you want to attract bees. Leave your stems standing over the winter, and then in the spring, you cut them down in varying lengths from 8 inches to 24 inches, and then you just leave them. And in the spring, when bees are looking for houses, they will find those stems and they'll make their little nest, and the bees will grow up in those stems throughout the summer, and you just leave them alone. And honestly, the new growth comes up, it covers up the old stems, you don't even notice them. Heather Holm has a website, she's got a lot of good information on there and a lot of good graphics. This graphic was actually created by Doug Talame's graduate student, Desiree Narango, who's got a lot of really good study papers out there. The website is pollinatorsnativeplants.com. That's Heather's website. Here she's talking, this graphic is about how to create soft landings. So underneath those beautiful oak trees that you're going to go home and plant, you want to not put mulch at the bottom. You want to leave plant debris. You want to plant your carrots plant and other native plants, maybe some foam flower. You're creating soft landings. So I read that as far as birds go, I think it was wood ducks that look for trees to nest in that have sedges and soft landings underneath, so that when they kick their fledglings out of the nest for a flying lesson, if things go wrong, they're landing on a soft plant. And that's the same thing with Lepidoptera too. So you have all these caterpillars. A lot of Lepidoptera are supported by trees, as we just said. So they're up in the trees, they're caterpillars. A lot of them need to fall down to the ground to complete their life cycle. So if you're up in a tree and you're going to land on the ground, wouldn't you rather land on a carex plant than a pile of bark? So you also want to plant in habitat layers. So you want to make sure that every layer is taken care of. At your bottom ground layer, you want your leaf litter, you want your carrots, you want your ground covers, leave the plant debris. Then you get to your, they're calling it a seasonal theme layer. This is from a graphic from a book called Planting in a Post-Wild World. Excellent book. I would highly recommend reading it. Your seasonal layer is that's where a lot of your color happens, your herbaceous perennials. That's where you're attracting all your pollinators and beneficial insects. And then your structural layer would include your shrubs, your understory trees, and then your canopy trees, all of which, of course, should be native. And of course, you want to eliminate pesticides wherever possible. Now, if you have a wasp nest over your garage door that you go in and out, yes, you have to spray that. And I know that in one of my properties, I'm dealing with this horrible weed. It's Artemisia wormwood. And I've read an awful lot about it. The only way you can get rid of this weed is to use a chemical. So I am using glyphosate, but I'm using it intelligently. You don't spray because you're worried about drift. I'm targeting just that plant. I go out with my cup and my paintbrush and I'm painting individual leaves. I don't even like using that, but my justification is once I get rid of that weed, I'm going to plant with native plants that will support our native wildlife. I do have a story to tell though. A couple years ago, before I knew what I know now, I was out weeding underneath my pussy willow tree, and I looked up and the branch was right there, and I was looking at that. That's my picture. Um, the branch was covered in all of these bugs. Very startling when it's right at your eye level. I went and I researched and I discovered they are giant willow aphids. And the way you get rid of giant willow aphids is to spray horticultural oil. That's what I was reading said. So I went out to Home Depot and I got my horticultural oil and I came back with all intentions of using it. And when I went out back to my pussy willow, this was a couple days later, I happened to notice that there was another insect on there. Thankfully, I didn't use the oil. I researched what was that other insect on there, and it turned out it was a lady beetle larva. And they were going to town on the giant willow aphids. So I thought, all right, fine, I'll let you go. I took a step back. I did not use the oil. It's actually still sitting capped and unused. I don't even know if it's good anymore on my garage shelf. I went back about a week later. I kept looking. About a week later, the giant willow aphids were gone. The lady beetle larvae were gone. And I was just feeling so ashamed that I almost prevented those lady beetle larvae from what was obviously a Thanksgiving feast. They took care of it for me. So perfect example of a beneficial insect taking care of a pest insect. I was so glad I did not get a chance to use that horticultural oil. Oh, the other thing I want to say is when you're using pesticides, of course, the label is the law. You have to make sure you read those labels, and if you have to use the pesticide, you use it only in the way in which it is intended to be used. I'm sorry for this that I put up that picture. You don't look at the bird in its mouth. It's rather a pretty picture. But I was looking at pictures of real cats with real birds in their mouth, and it was disgusting. So if you want to have a bird-friendly habitat, you have to keep your cats inside. You just have to. In the US alone, I found that free-ranging domestic cats kill 1.3 to 4 billion birds every year. Like, that's huge. I actually have a problem because we butt up to Nature's Preserve, and someone's cat, I have to find out whose cat that is. Someone's cat is out there roaming, and I got to get rid of that cat because we have a lot of native plantings in my yard. I have a lot of birds in my yard, and I don't want to sacrifice them with that. So if you have cats, you keep them inside. Birds also need a water source, and the water source needs to be provided all year long. So if you have a bird bath out there, you can buy de-icers to plug in. They're fairly inexpensive, and that will keep the water free and running all winter long. For the growing season, you can always buy or plant a native bird bath. That's a native plant. It's called cup plant, and the leaves cut the stem, It's super cool. And where the leaves cup the stem, it literally is a cup. And so then after the rain happens or after you water is held within that cup. I have seen beneficial insects take drinks from that. I have found tree frogs in my cup plant. The birds drink from it. It's wonderful. Now that is a big plant. My cup plant, which have been growing for years and years, but they're about 10 feet tall and this wide. However, right plant, right place, that's in full sun and moist. If you want to, at my house, before I knew what I know now, I did plant a cup plant, which is getting a lot more shade and that growth is a lot more controlled. I don't get as many blooms. I get some, but not as many. But if you have the space, cup plant is a wonderful plant. It attracts so many beneficial insects in addition to providing the water source. And then once it goes to seed, the birds absolutely love it. And of course, hummingbirds always get their own slide because they're so unique. But if you want to attract hummingbirds to your yard, you're going to want to plant those long tubular flowers to accommodate its long beak, such as cardinal flower and columbine. Columbine is funny, it's a gorgeous plant, but when you plant a columbine, you plant it here, and it's beautiful and it's happy because you did right plant, right place. And the next year you go out and you're looking forward to your columbine, and it doesn't come up there. And you think, oh darn, what happened? And then look up because you'll see it there and there and there and there. It finds where it wants to go. That's fine. Foxglove beard tongue, if you can get a mass planting of foxglove beard tongue, it's absolutely gorgeous. And honeysuckle, hummingbirds also can nectar off of trees, such as eastern redbuds, buckeyes, or tulip trees. Tulip trees actually have beautiful flowers, which people tend not to notice until you see the petals on the ground because they're up so high, but they're absolutely gorgeous. And then after you've done all that we've talked about, you really need to sit back and enjoy the beauty you've created. Enjoy your visitors to your garden. Give yourself a pat on the back because you did good. What you plant in your gardens makes a difference. So it's very important that what you plant is something that you want, something that supports wildlife. You want to make it a positive difference. So if you need help in identifying any insects or plants, the Lake County Master Gardeners are here to help. You can send us a photo or call us 853-2625, or you can email us your problem and we will diagnose your problem or identify your plant or insect for free. You can also use the iNaturalist app, which is a great app. With iNaturalist, you take a picture of the plant or disease or insect that you want to identify. The app itself suggests an identification based on the time of year and your location. And then you have wonderful experts that scroll around all the submissions and add their opinions on what it could be. If you're looking for plant information, the Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder is a great source. It not only tells you characteristics about the plant, how tall is it, when is it going to bloom, what soil does it like, it gives you tips on how to grow it, it warns you of any diseases or insects that might attack it. I love it because you see next to the name Helenium autumnale, there's that little microphone. If you press on that, it gives you the pronunciation of the botanical name, which is great. And then if you happen to be looking up a plant that is a problem plant, they flag it and give you a link to the invasive plant atlas. Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center database is another one that I use. And I like this one because they have teamed up with the Xerces Society. So when you look up a plant, it will list, according to the Xerces Society, does it support our native bees? Does it support biological control, which means your good garden insects? Does it feed birds? That's all there. And this butterflies and moths of North America. Okay, I'm pretty excited. That's a Virginia creeper sphinx moth. On our property, we are battling, oh my gosh, years and years of English ivy growing wild. So I am on a rampage to get rid of it. And in one small area, I've knocked it back enough where Virginia creeper came up. And I'm so excited. That's a vigorous vine, but it's native and it's the host plant to the Virginia creeper sphinx moth, which I'm hoping to see in the next year or two. Where to buy native plants, as I mentioned, the local soil and water conservation districts are having their plant sales right now, all for Lake Geauga, Cuyahoga, and Ashtabula. And after those sales are over, if you're looking for plants, native plants, you can go to OhioNativePlantMonth.org, which lists the native plant nurseries in Ohio. And just so you know, April is Ohio Native Plant Month, which is super exciting. And I like to finish with this quote. It's written by was said by Benjamin Boat, who wrote A New Garden Ethic. Cultivating divine compassion for an uncertain future, also a very good book. But he said, native plant gardening does not limit your aesthetic choices. It expands your ethical ones. And there we go. So if you have any questions, I can answer them now. If you have questions after and you want to email me, that's me, Amy Goletz at yahoo.com, or you can email mgdlakecounty@gmail.com. I monitor that email as well. So either way, you're getting free. So thank you.
Basically, the purple leaves and the pink flowers are not good, and the green leaves and white flowers are preferred.
Correct. Yes, because our native wildlife has grown up with the straight species, white flower and green leaf.
You know, like Green County gardeners or soil water conservation is selling this year in their 9 markets. It's on their list.
It's the straight species.
It is.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they're selling all natives.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Amy, you didn't mention the butterfly bush and blue whale. How do you feel about that?
Okay. Hate it. So I got worried. I had a whole slide. Had a whole slide about that, and I got nervous about how long I was going to talk. So that was one that I took out. But I can talk about it now. I'm glad you brought it up. So butterfly bush. I have had so many different discussions with people who think they're doing a good thing by planting butterfly bush because of the name. And I will say butterflies are seen on the butterfly bush, but it's not a good plant. It's not on the invasive species list yet, but they're watching it because it violently throws out volunteers. I had a butterfly bush again back before I knew what I was doing. I planted a butterfly bush. I took that out. I was trying to remember, like 5 to 7 years ago, I am still getting seedlings appearing that of course, I'm ripping out as soon as I see them. The butterflies that are landing on that butterfly bush are getting substandard nectar and pollen. So no, that I would not plant butterfly bush. And so on my slide that I should have kept in, I said if you want a purple flowering, much better to plant New England aster or liatris, that's blazing star, gorgeous native plants. Those are herbaceous perennials. If you're looking for a shrub, how about summer sweet, which is beautifully fragrant and attracts so many beneficials and birds too. Yeah.
Do you know that name for it?
Of
Butterfly?
it's Budleia.
Camellia?
Yeah, Budleia. It's Budleai. Yeah. Budleia. Yeah. There you go. And I talked to the Ohio Invasive Pink Plant Council to see if I could say it's invasive, and they said no, not yet. Yeah. But a lot of places do have it on their list of invasive plants. So yeah. Yeah, so if you have that, it has to be ripped out.
Speaking of, well, you go to a nursery and order what you hope will be beautiful Eastern redbud, you'll end up something with washed out pink flowers, which I guess is some kind of color already. Are they as good for say Lepidoptera as the
I would worry about that because you're changing the flower color. Because the straight species is a beautiful, like a vibrant pink.
that's what you're looking
Yeah, yeah. I think that you need to, and I'm willing to research it for you if you gave me the exact name of the one that you're thinking of, and I can look it up. But I would
too late, they're already
okay. Sorry, sorry, but yeah, I would say, I know what you're talking about. It is quite a washed out. Like we've got the native species, and that color is really like what I showed on the photo. It's a vibrant pink. It's quite gorgeous. When you go shopping for native plants at a nursery, you want to make sure that you're asking them a couple questions. One, you want to make sure that you're getting natives, that you're getting your straight species if that's what you want. If you want a cultivar, that's fine, but they need to know the difference. I felt so bad. I knew of an older couple who was talking to me, and they were very proud that they had bought a bunch of native plants at a nursery that I know doesn't sell them. So I said, "Do you mind if I see what you've got?" And they showed me, and there was nothing native. It was a bunch of cultivars, and someone who worked at the nursery who wasn't educated told them they were native, and they relied. And I crushed their hopes and dreams. I felt so bad telling them, I'm like, your whole trunk is not. So they were very upset, but at least they know now. So you want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable nursery. You also want to make sure that the nursery, that the inventory is neonic free. So neonics are, it's a form of pesticide that some nurseries do use. It prevents there is a justifiable use for it because there are some really horrible insects that will attack these buds. And I get it; these nurseries need to sell things, but the problem with neonics is it's a systemic pesticide, which means that the plant has taken up this pesticide. So it's present in all parts of the plant. It's present in the leaves, it's present in the nectar and the flowers, the pollen. It's just dreadful. So you want to make sure if you're buying a native plant that you're buying from a neonic-free nursery. And they'll know, they'll tell you. And you just need to say neonic and they'll say yes or no. Very important. Yes.
Do you want to stop her now?
So I'm not allowed to because
Okay, so if you guys want to know, Amy's Nursery is in Chesterland, it's on Ballard Mill Road, it's Leah Gardens. So yeah, okay.
Yes, it's yeah. So it's separation of church and state. As a master gardener, I am not allowed to promote. You can talk to me afterwards. Yes.
For we sad souls who don't have a green thumb there, I'd like to grow one. Can we identify, are there landscape gardeners that we could hire or contract with that have this expertise and can deliver?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know of a couple that specify with native plants, and I can share those names with you. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and they're hard to find. I will say the more landscapers I talk to, the more involved they are getting with native plants. It all starts with you guys. If the customers start yelling, "I want natives," then they have to oblige and they have to teach themselves, and that's what's happening. So, which is a great thing. So, all right. Thank you so much.
One more for another. Amy's Nursery is snowman too. So they Yuri Allegheny Partnership. It's a group of park districts, even though we sit down and create Colden and it's leafbio.org. And that native plants communities resources across the top bar, and if you get the native plants that way, it actually has a nursery finder. So you can see the person who looks at my house is Amy's Nursery, or there are some growers that are out of Willoughby, out of so you can find these local places that are selling plants in gallon pots. You know, they're just tiny little plants or some beautiful plants. So you might have to search a little harder, but just start asking around and you can find out what these local searches.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks everyone for joining us in person and online, and we will see you back here next month for our talk on managing grasslands. So if you have a big yard, you can work on that. All right, thanks again.
Okay, talk to you. I have a movie left. Yeah, it's sweet. Do you believe it's sweet?
Yeah, and I got that's really something that actually sure. That's